She stood in front of the church holding Eric's hand like he was her savior. That's when the pastor thanked her for a $320,000 donation made in both their names. The crowd froze, her smile cracked. She didn't know I was sitting in the back row, watching. That money, it was our life savings, my inheritance from my father. 32 years of marriage, and she drained it in 6 weeks, on a spiritual retreat with a man she met in Bible study. I didn't scream. I didn't stop her. I just prayed and let God handle what I couldn't. What happened next wasn't loud. It was divine. And if you've ever loved someone who betrayed you while praising God, you'll want to hear how this ends. 32 years. That's how long Linda and I were married. We raised 2 boys, paid off a modest house in Ohio, and stacked away close to $450,000 between my retirement account and the inheritance I got when my father passed. I trusted her with everything. She managed the finances after I retired, said it gave her purpose, and honestly, I liked seeing her with purpose again. But that morning, something felt off. She kissed my cheek like always, said she was heading to her women's prayer group, and drove off. But her eyes, they didn't hold warmth. They held distance. I sat down with my coffee, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. Then my phone buzzed. Alert! $45,000 withdrawal confirmed, joint account. I blinked. Maybe a glitch. Maybe she made a donation. Maybe. I walked to the small wooden drawer where we kept the checkbook and account ledgers. Gone. So was the spare debit card. I didn't yell. I didn't call her. Instead, I drove to St. Matthew's, the little brick church where we renewed our vows on our 25th anniversary. I sat in the back pew. No music, no one around, just me and a whispered prayer. Lord, I don't know what's happening, but if I'm being fooled, show me. Open my eyes, please. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for truth. And sometimes when you ask with an honest heart, God doesn't wait long to answer. What happened the next morning nearly broke me. The next morning, Linda came home glowing. She placed a lavender-scented candle on the kitchen counter and said, Eric thinks I'm finally stepping into the season God meant for me. Eric. The name slipped out like it had always belonged in our kitchen. I stared at her. She poured herself coffee like nothing had changed. Then she told me she was attending a spiritual retreat, 3 weeks up in Arizona, a place for renewal, for cleansing. She said she needed to unplug from old identities. Old identities. That's what I had become to her? An old identity? She smiled and said it was all paid for. I asked how. That's when she looked me straight in the eyes and said, God will always provide. We just have to listen when He speaks. That line, it chilled me, because I knew the account she was listening to was ours. I didn't shout. I nodded slowly, stood up, and kissed her on the forehead. And that same night, I opened my laptop and pulled up our banking history. 4 withdrawals, $45,000, $80,000, $120,000, $75,000, gone. In less than 6 weeks, she had moved out nearly $320,000 to a private account I didn't recognize, labeled New Light Ministry Retreat Fund. But there was no ministry, no spiritual center, just a small property deed in Sedona, Arizona. Signed under 2 names, Linda Aldridge and Eric Kinney. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't call a lawyer. I just folded my hands and whispered again, All right, Lord, you showed me. What do I do next? His answer wouldn't come in thunder. It would come in silence and in strategy. I didn't storm out. I didn't flip the table. I just sat there, staring at the wall for a long time. There's something that happens when you hit a certain age. You learn the difference between reacting and responding. And I knew if I reacted like a younger man, I'd lose more than just money. So I responded like a man who trusted God more than anger. That night, I pulled out a yellow legal pad. I wrote down every transfer Linda had made. I made copies of every bank statement. Then I called Joseph Hines, an old friend from church, who also happened to be a trust attorney. He didn't say much, just told me to come in the next day with everything I had. Said he'd seen this kind of thing before, people hiding behind the veil of faith to do damage. The next morning, I met him at his office just off East Broad Street. We moved the remaining $118,000 into a private trust under my name, protected under Ohio law. He set up notifications on all linked accounts. If Linda tried to move another dollar, I'd know. Then Joseph leaned forward and said, "Now the hard part, you wait, you pray, and when the moment comes, you act with peace, not pride." I drove home that afternoon in silence. The air felt heavier, like truth had finally settled in my bones. Linda was already packing. Her Bible sat on top of her suitcase. She smiled and said, "I'll send you pictures from Sedona. It's going to be beautiful." I nodded, helped her load the car, watched her drive off without looking back. But I wasn't angry. I was ready. Because when someone takes everything and calls it God's will, you let God take the lead in giving it back. God sees everything, and this time, so did my lawyer's camera. That's what I told myself 2 days after Linda left. Joseph, my attorney, had arranged for something extra. A private investigator he trusted down in Arizona. Discreet, quiet, the kind who doesn't need to ask twice. By the end of the week, I had access to a live feed, a single camera hidden on the front porch of the Sedona property. Facing the door, simple, legal, all mine. The first time I saw them, they were barefoot. Linda and Eric holding hands, laughing, sipping wine out of mason jars like they were still in college. She wore a loose white robe and no wedding ring. They weren't praying. They weren't meditating. They were celebrating. I sat there in my living room in Ohio watching on a 14-inch laptop screen while the woman I gave my life to toasted my inheritance with a man who didn't even own socks. I didn't cry, but I did close the laptop, and I walked outside into the cold November air and stood barefoot on the porch. The wood was freezing under my feet. I remember looking up at the sky and whispering, "Lord, I see it now. All of it. I won't fight fire with fire, but I will not play the fool either." And I meant it. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to expose her just yet. I was going to wait for his timing because something deep down told me she was going to walk into a moment she couldn't walk out of. And when she did, I'd be right there, not as a victim, but as a witness. She thought God gave her a new life. She didn't know he was just setting the stage. 2 weeks into her retreat, Linda returned briefly. She said she forgot her birth certificate. I already knew why. She needed it to transfer title on the house in Sedona. She walked in like she still lived here. Wore perfume I didn't recognize. Smelled like desert flowers and denial. I handed her the envelope. She thanked me like I was the doorman of her old life. Said she'd be back in Sedona by Sunday. But first, she planned to stop at the church for morning service. I smiled. Sunday came. I sat in the far back pew at St. Matthew's wearing my navy suit in silence. Linda stood up front with Eric. Yes, he came with her, smiling like a saint. Then Pastor Glenn made an announcement. We'd like to recognize a generous contribution made in honor of faith and new beginnings. A $320,000 donation from Sister Linda Aldridge and Brother Eric Kinney. You could feel it, the shift in the room, the cold air that replaced reverence. People stopped breathing. Linda turned pale. Eric looked at her like she'd just confessed to murder. Because I had sent anonymous copies of the banking records to Pastor Glenn 2 nights before. No note, no message, just facts. And now in front of her entire church family, her lie stood naked in God's house. She scanned the crowd, and then she saw me, sitting in the back, hands folded, eyes steady. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just shrank. She left the building without saying a word, but that was just the beginning, because faith without truth will always collapse in public. She wasn't excommunicated, but no one looked her in the eye anymore. After that Sunday, Linda stopped attending church. Not officially. She just faded. The prayer circle that once called her sister now avoided her pew. The women she taught Bible study with didn't return her calls. Even Pastor Glenn, kind as he was, greeted her with a handshake, not a hug. She didn't scream, didn't deny, didn't explain. Because how do you explain stealing from a man who gave you everything, then calling it God's will? She stayed in Sedona longer than planned. I knew through the camera feed. She started taking walks alone. Eric was gone. No explanation. One day he just drove off in a red pickup and never came back. The house she bought with stolen money became quiet. The lights stayed off more than they stayed on. And in our hometown, no one said her name aloud. But when people passed me in the grocery store, they nodded. With a kind of quiet respect I hadn't felt in years. Because I hadn't exploded, I hadn't made a scene. I had let truth do the talking, and that truth worked like a slow tide, pulling her further from the shore of reputation, while I stood steady, dry, and still. One afternoon I got a letter. It was from Linda, a single page. She wrote, "I miss the days when you prayed over dinner. I don't hear God anymore. I think I made him leave." I didn't reply. I folded the letter and placed it in my Bible, right between Psalm 37 and Proverbs 21. Because sometimes God doesn't strike with lightning. He lets them feel the silence until it echoes louder than any punishment ever could. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's deciding you're not carrying their sin on your back anymore. I filed for divorce that same week, not out of spite, not for revenge, but because some chapters have to end no matter how long they've been written. Joseph helped me handle the paperwork. Quietly, legally, no public scandal, no court drama. When Linda was served, she didn't contest a thing, didn't even call. In the settlement, I kept our home, the remainder of the trust and the retirement savings that hadn't been touched. She walked away with a suitcase and the Sedona property, now in foreclosure. She didn't fight, because by then she was already fighting herself. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated. But all I felt was stillness. One night I stood in our old bedroom, her closet empty, her side of the bed untouched, and I whispered, "I forgive you, Linda." Not because she asked. She never did, but because God didn't give me peace so I could keep bitterness warm at night. People around town started noticing the change. I wasn't weighed down anymore. I wasn't distracted by pain. I started cooking again, volunteered at the church pantry, even fixed the broken fence out back I'd ignored for years. Linda sent another letter. It said, "I saw you at the hardware store last week. You looked light, like someone who's been loved better by God than I ever knew how." I folded that one too, placed it in the same spot in my Bible. Didn't reply, because by then I wasn't waiting for her to return. I was waiting for what God had next. It's strange how peace can feel louder than silence when you've been through a storm. The house was still. No more Sunday casseroles, no more perfume in the hallway, no more forced prayers over dinner. But I wasn't lonely. I was finally still. Each morning I woke before the sun, made coffee, sat on the porch wrapped in my flannel robe, watching the sky turn from ash to gold. I started a small men's group at the church, mostly widowers, a few divorced men like me. We didn't talk much. We just sat together, drank black coffee, and let the quiet fill the cracks. One Tuesday, Pastor Glenn asked me to share my story, not the details, just the grace part. I told the group, I lost a wife, but I found a better version of myself, not bitter, not angry, just free. The men nodded, some wiped their eyes. None said a word. Back home, I planted tomatoes in the backyard, repaired the squeaky floorboard in the hallway, replaced the old porch light with one that flickered like a candle, and every night before bed I read a psalm out loud, not for show, just for me, just for God. One evening I received a call from a friend of a friend in Sedona. Linda was seen checking into a small clinic, something about anxiety, insomnia, her face pale, her voice brittle. Eric hadn't come back. The retreat house was now empty. The power had been shut off. And all I could think was, when you try to steal peace from someone God is protecting, you end up losing the one thing you can't buy back. But Linda's fall wasn't finished yet. She didn't knock, she didn't cry, she just stood there, hoping I hadn't healed without her. It was a Saturday evening in mid-October. The leaves had turned rust and gold. I had just pulled a pie out of the oven, pecan, her old favorite, when I heard a soft knock at the door. I opened it. There she was, Linda, thinner, eyes hollow, hair tied back like she didn't care anymore. She looked at me like a woman who realized the fire she started didn't just burn the house. It burned the path back too. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, just stepped onto the porch and sat down in the old rocking chair. She followed, sat beside me on the step. She didn't apologize, she didn't explain, she just whispered, "I don't sleep, I can't pray. You were the only person who ever made God feel real to me." I looked at her hands. No ring, they trembled. After a long silence, I said, "Linda, I forgive you, I already have. But this house isn't your home anymore." She nodded, didn't argue. I stood up, walked inside, and closed the door behind me. Not to shut her out, but to protect the peace God rebuilt inside these walls. I watched from the window as she walked back to her car, slow, empty, and as I sat down with that pie still warm on the counter, I whispered, "Lord, thank you. Not for justice, but for mercy that didn't make me bitter." But the real ending, that came the next Sunday, with a man I'd never met, holding something that would change everything. They say revenge is sweet, but peace is holy. That Sunday, I went to church like always, same pew, same jacket, same cup of lukewarm coffee afterward with the men from my group. Then someone tapped my shoulder, a man in his late 30s, soft-spoken, nervous. "Are you Mr. Aldridge?" I nodded. He handed me a small envelope and said, "My name's Thomas. Eric was my uncle. He passed away 3 nights ago, but before he did, he asked me to give you this." He walked away before I could ask a single question. I sat down on the wooden bench out front and opened the envelope. Inside was a single note. "You were right. She never loved me. She loved what she could get, and I was too foolish to see it. You didn't have to say a word. God spoke louder through your silence than I ever could through mine. I'm sorry. Eric." There was no joy in reading it, no gloating, just a quiet exhale. I folded the note and placed it with the 2 letters from Linda. all tucked between Psalm 37 and Proverbs 21. That night I walked into the backyard. The air was cool, stars wide open above me, and I whispered, "God, you didn't just protect me, you redeemed what was broken." Some men fight back with fists, some with lawyers, but me, I fought back by not fighting at all. And somehow that was enough. I didn't win in court, I didn't stand on a stage and tell the world what she did. I didn't take the house in Sedona or demand every last dollar back. I didn't need to, because what I gained was worth more than anything she ever took from me. You see, at some point in life, especially when you're past 60, you stop chasing justice that fits your and you start praying for peace that fits your soul. I prayed when I didn't know the truth. I prayed when the truth nearly broke me. And I prayed when God quietly handed me the strength to let go. Not out of weakness, but because dragging pain behind you only makes the road longer. Linda betrayed 32 years of marriage. She lied, stole, and wrapped it all in the language of faith. But God doesn't bless what's built on deceit, and He sure doesn't protect those who hide behind His name while doing harm. In the end, she lost more than I ever did. She lost herself, her dignity, her place in a community that once called her sister. And yet, I don't hate her. I forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine. Because forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about taking the hook out of your own heart. Eric learned that too in his final moments. His letter wasn't long, but it said everything a man needs to say before meeting his maker. He saw what I had already accepted, that God speaks louder through stillness than any man can through rage. I didn't have to scream, didn't have to slam doors, didn't have to shame anyone. I just had to stay rooted in truth, in prayer, in the quiet kind of strength that doesn't need an audience. And now, my house is still. The nights are soft. I wake up with peace, not panic. I cook again. I laugh again. I walk slowly and I notice the color of the leaves. Some people call it aging. I call it healing. So to the man listening to this, if you've ever felt betrayed, discarded, or lied to by someone you love deeply, let me say this: you don't need revenge, you need peace. And peace doesn't scream, it settles, like dust in the morning sun. And if you're wondering how you get there, you don't rush, you don't strike back, you don't curse the silence. You trust, you pray with an honest heart, you do the next right thing, and you let God do what only He can, because the justice that comes from Him, it's slower, softer, but it never misses, and when it finally arrives, it feels like mercy, not the kind that erases what happened, but the kind that lets you live again without it owning you. That is the kind of ending I never planned for, and somehow it's the one I'm most thankful for.